My own journey to love began with the realization that I was the biggest block in all my relationships. In all my experiences with love, it was me. I had a love block, and it was sabotaging all my efforts to have a healthy, loving relationship. Not only with, a potential life partner, but also everyone else in my life. The thing is, we grow up in our lives having all these things happen around us. We come to a point where we have our own challenges, but often we don't make the connection between what happened in the past and why we're going through certain things in our present. And so the goal of today is to help you make that connection, to help you connect the dots between why you're experiencing certain things in your relationships or lack of relationships today, and how it connects back to things that you might have experienced in the past. So think about the relationships in your life. Just take a moment and just make a mental note. Are they easy? Are they effortless? Or are they painful, stressful? Maybe they leave a bitter taste in your mouth every time you think about certain events that might have happened in the past. Now, if you feel or recognize that, yes, the relationships in your life right now, or even the ones in your past, are stressful, maybe there's a disconnect in your life, maybe there are frequent misunderstandings, arguments. If any of those things are sort of what's coming up for you, then love is causing you pain. I want you to just recognize that your relationships and therefore love is causing you pain. So I am a love and relationship coach. I've been working with people for over 15 years, and I tend to attract a lot of women as my clients. In my past decade and a half of coaching and healing women, I've helped hundreds of women attract their soulmates, fix their broken or painful relationships with their partners, and most importantly, develop self-love. I'm going to introduce the topic of love blocks, the concept of love blocks that represents, the obstacles or whatever's getting in your way of having love be easy, effortless, comfortable, and joyful. Let's get started. So a love block is really something you believe to be true about love that is faulty. It is something you believe to be true about men, relationships, love, people who care about you or who should care about you. So this is unbeknownst to you that this is really what's going on in your subconscious, but you are approaching life trying to protect yourself from all these things, these love blocks that you anticipate are going to show up in your life. If your life experiences have taught you that love always ends in pain, you will go into every loving relationship defensive, ready to spring to attack in case someone tries to hurt you again. And sometimes you'll try to hurt them first or push them away or sabotage the relationship to protect yourself because deep down you're worried they're going to hurt you anyways. So you're either on the defense or you're on the offensive, anticipating that relationship to cause you pain. And so you act in these ways that are really motivated by protecting yourself, even if the other person has no intention of hurting you or causing you pain. That is an example of a love block that might be playing out in your life. And so what I'm telling you, and this is really the discovery that I made in my own life, and then tested it with every single client that I've ever worked with, okay? And this is how I tested it. I told them that we can't do anything about other people and what they've done to us, but what we can do is take responsibility, be accountable for everything that has ever happened to us. Every experience we've had, we are going to take accountability and we are going to change the belief systems, the trauma, the events in our own life. We are going to learn from them instead of holding on to them as pain and suffering. And what we're going to do is we are going to shift these love blocks out of our life. We're going to, release them or transform them. Now, interestingly enough, I've also discovered that our love blocks can be internal or external. Let me tell you a little bit about that. And I'm going to go through each of these internal and external influences or orientations when it comes to love blocks. So we've got cultural and familial expectations. So Sometimes we have this pressure to meet our culture or our family's expectations about relationships, and that can cause a lot of internal conflict and stress. So that can show up as a love block. There can be work-life imbalance when you are always prioritizing work over your personal life, okay? And that could be whether you're in a relationship or not in a relationship, but the tendency to not have that work-life balance can leave you very little time for nurturing your relationships, and that could be a block. Another block would be fear of losing independence. And I'm talking really about the influences on these blocks in our life. You know, some of my clients had this fear that if I'm in a relationship, it can take away my freedom. When I was single, I didn't want to focus on love because I thought that if I had someone in my life, then I wouldn't be able to fulfill my purpose. Like I had to choose either my purpose, which was helping people and, you know, healing people. And I had a well-being center I just started. So it was either I could do that or I could have a partner, but I couldn't have both. And so that's another kind of, you know, love block that is more external. Then there's comparing yourself to others. Sometimes we compare ourselves to other relationships, or we compare ourselves to other, you know, women, and sometimes we compare our partners to other men, right? And that can create a lot of dissatisfaction or insecurity for us. And finally, there's unrealistic expectations. Sometimes we have these really unrealistic, idealistic views of what a relationship should be, and that can lead to constant disappointment. Often our unrealistic expectations, they feel completely valid to us. They feel like right. We don't see them as unrealistic. It takes someone else outside of you to show you, hey, you are just sabotaging your relationship by, you know, having these really unrealistic or idealistic views of your relationship. Next, let's look at some internally influenced blocks. Now, our blocks can come from three other areas that are kind of big: our fears, our lack of self-worth, and past experiences. So let's talk a little bit about each one. Now, in terms of fear, sometimes we have a fear of vulnerability, right? Fear that we could be rejected or turned down, and so we don't want to put ourselves out there. Sometimes that fear comes up where you think somebody will reject you when you show vulnerability. And of course, the fear of vulnerability makes us afraid to show up, to show our true emotions, to open up, and to really connect with someone. And then the fear of rejection actually is like, I'm afraid that they'll reject me. Okay. And sometimes this is hand in hand with vulnerability. And sometimes it's really just afraid to be rejected by anyone, by your partner, if you're in a relationship. And so you don't really show your true self in a relationship. Another one could be fear of abandonment, especially if you have grown up in a childhood where one or more parent was missing. Either they were maybe working abroad or they were working all the time. And that can create a fear of abandonment. So you are constantly in fear that your partner will leave you, or that if you give your heart to someone, they'll crush it, they'll walk away, okay? And this might make you more needy, it might make you clingy, more than necessary. Then there's commitment phobia. This is like you're trying to protect yourself from being in a relationship or being loved because you have some faulty beliefs about it. And finally, there's fear of change. You know, some people feel like if I'm in a relationship, it's going to change my life, or suddenly I won't have the freedom in my life, or I won't have the ability to make my own choices. Internal blocks in terms of lack of self-worth, it could be low self-esteem, lack of confidence in yourself, and you don't believe that you even deserve love. You feel like, why would anyone love me? Because I'm not worthy, I'm not enough. Then you've got negative self-talk. This is where you constantly criticize yourself. And that can, of course, affect your self-esteem, and it can make you feel like love is, you know, basically someone putting you down or criticizing you. So it's actually you criticizing yourself, being afraid that someone you're with is going to do that for you. And by the way, if you have a partner who's very critical and it bothers you, chances are you are very critical with yourself. So that's something to take a look at. The next one is perfectionism. This is the belief that you have to be perfect, and that can create a lot of unrealistic standards and get in the way of like a true connection with someone. The next one is dependency, relying too much on a partner for emotional fulfillment. Like you need somebody to feel good about yourself. And that can actually drive a partner away, is when you're too dependent on them, right? And it might create like an unhealthy dynamic. And finally, not knowing what you want. A lot of people are in relationships where they're in the relationship because the other person pursued them and not because they chose that person and they really want to be with that person. I know a lot of people who are in these kind of relationships where they didn't choose their partner, but their partner pursued them and they figured, okay, well, this is a good person and they'll take care of me. And it's not really about what I want. It's about what I should look for in a partner. And they check those boxes. So I'm going to be in that relationship. And that can cause a lot of stress in the relationship if you're in that kind of a relationship. And it can also make it hard to, find somebody to be in a relationship with. So it can create a lot of confusion and also lead to unsuccessful relationships. And finally, we've got past experiences. So any kind of unresolved past trauma. If you've got past emotional wounds or trauma connected to relationships with other people, your own, or it could be, again, things that you saw growing up. It might make it hard to trust other people when you have trauma. Another one is attachment to past relationships. Like if you're still holding on to a relationship from your past, that might get in the way of a healthy relationship with your current partner or even being in a new relationship. Then you've got trust issues. A lack of trust could be from past betrayals, make it hard for you to trust anyone else and let them in. And then we've got limiting beliefs about love. I'm not meant to be loved. All the good ones are taken. And finally, we've got emotional unavailability, right? If you are closed off emotionally. And this could be because in your culture or in your family, you were not allowed to show your emotions, or in your family, maybe you didn't express love. There wasn't much like expression of love, whether it's verbal or even nonverbal. Maybe you didn't say, I love you, you didn't hug. So it's hard for you to express emotions with anybody. So sometimes it makes you emotionally unavailable, either because you don't know how to express your emotions, or alternatively, it could also be that you don't feel comfortable doing that. And that can make you shut off from really experiencing love with another person. Now, there are 4 main places where our blocks originate: childhood influences, society-related influences, familial influences, and our personal experiences. In terms of childhood influences, we talked about the unresolved past trauma. We talked about the attachment to past relationships. We talked about trust issues. So if you had an environment like a dysfunctional family type of system, then it becomes very hard to trust other people. If you were constantly criticized by your parents, one or more, right? If you were told you're not good enough, or, if that's the way your parents thought you would become better, is by telling you what was wrong with you, that could result in growing up and being very critical of yourself because you got criticized as a child. That's the only way you know how to motivate yourself. And then if you, in childhood, you were never allowed to be independent. You were always like, pampered or coddled, or even if your parent was very dependent, maybe you saw that that's how you should be. That could result in dependency issues. If you didn't have parents or primary caregivers who emotionally bonded with you, it could make you emotionally unavailable as an adult. And of course, childhood experiences that you witnessed around you could also create limiting beliefs about love. Like, men cheat. If you saw one of your parents cheat, then you might grow up thinking that all men cheat because someone you loved cheated. There's fear of rejection. So as a child, if you were constantly rejected, either by your partner or in school, you could be bullied. This could create a fear of rejection, right? Then you've got low self-esteem. And this could also be like, if you didn't have parents who encouraged you, they didn't affirm to you, when you were doing the right thing, they didn't praise you or reward you. If you didn't have those kind of experiences in life, then that could result in low self-esteem. And I often see if you had a mom who didn't have high self-esteem, then my clients grow up also with low self-esteem. So a lot of times they're, genetically passed down also, things like self-esteem. Okay. Let's talk about society influences. So if you grew up in a society like I did, where there were certain expectations or certain standards that you grew up with. For example, in my culture, if you are pretty, it is something people really like praise and talk about. The idea behind it is the prettier you are, the more likely you are to land a good husband. In today's day and age, teenagers, right, with what's happening on social media, they are constantly comparing themselves to what they see on social media. So that's another example of society influences. Next one would be unrealistic expectations. Again, this ties into media, and also it could be similar to, how I was growing up with certain, society pressures. So that could be another influence coming from society. Perfectionism is another one. So there's this idea of being superwoman. You have to be the perfect wife, the perfect mom, the perfect everything. And that can also create a lot of pressure. There's fear of vulnerability, which is you're not encouraged often by society to show weakness. You're not encouraged to talk about your struggles, okay? And that makes it hard for you to be vulnerable with people and also in your own relationships. And finally, commitment phobia also, it could be a societal influence, because there's this culture now of like casual relationships and how dating is. And, that can create a lot of commitment issues because you're so afraid that you will be, discarded, or you will be ghosted, or there are all these like modern dating terms, and they can create a fear of commitment. Then you have family related influences, again, cultural or family. For example, my relatives expected that, I would marry into a certain type of a family or a certain type of a culture. I have an aunt and uncle actually who would keep saying, it's so important to marry into your culture. It's so important to marry this kind of a family. And there was always this pressure, and it was very, very discouraged to marry out of your religion or marry out of your culture, okay? Or to marry someone who wasn't very well financially settled, right? So these are examples of family influences. There's fear of losing independence. That could be also like coming from family influences, is like if you feel that if I get married, it means that now I don't have my own voice. I don't have my own choices. I have to follow what the family expects me to do. Also, we talked about, past trauma and comparing yourself to others, like whether within your family, you might be compared to your brother or your sister. And these can make you feel like you're not worthy or good enough for love or for a relationship. Okay, that can create a lot of insecurity as well. And the final one is personal experiences. So our own experiences where things have changed and it has caused us pain, or stepping out of our comfort zones, our own personal experiences with, our past relationships and being with the wrong person, or other limiting beliefs we carry. All of these can also influence the creation of love blocks in our life. You got to uncover what is your love block. And when I say uncover what is your love block, where's it coming from? Why am I creating this block? What am I trying to protect myself from? It's really about understanding where are these blocks coming from, and then doing the healing, doing the inner work to change all of this, to remove these barriers and blocks, to release them. And we need to do this with understanding, with healing work. There's a lot of forgiveness that tends to happen. There's a lot of realizations that you need to have about yourself. There's behavior change. So a lot of it goes into that, but it starts with uncovering what is your love block and recognizing, hey, the problem is not out there, it's in here. You can't change anything outside of you. You can only change yourself. I have a mantra that I repeat over and over again with my clients and with my students. It is as simple as this. Everything in your life is your creation. It's happening because of something within you. And we know that because when we do the inner work, the changing, the releasing, the forgiveness, the events outside of you, they change completely every single time.
If you're ready to uncover the hidden patterns that are keeping you stuck in your love life, then take my Love Blocks quiz and discover your love block type. It's quick and insightful, and you'll instantly get personalized results that'll help you break through those barriers and start attracting your perfect match. Just click the link in the description below and let's get to the root of what's holding you back so you can finally create your happily ever after. You are loved.